He paid the sheriff's price to kill a wicked Sale, but the nun he saved began to wonder who she truly served. Wind bit like a knife, and the noon sun flashed hard off trampled frost. Breath turned white above the main street as voices rose and coins clinked. The trouble was right there on the courthouse steps in Redwater Crossing, Dakota Territory, late February 1878. A makeshift dais where a notice board leaned, and a sheriff's ledger lay open beside a wrapped axe head that had been taken as a pledge against a debt. Sister Agnes Lark, 24, slim under a torn winter habit and a brown wool cloak, stood with wrists bound by thin cord for show rather than law, her eyes dry, her chin set. Sheriff Amos Keeler, hat rim frosted, read out the paper that a mine boss had shoved under his nose. A bonded labor writ dressed up as help for a church debt. The crowd called numbers like a market, laughter shallow. The word work used where everyone meant ownership, the man behind it all. Malcolm Vane, 40, a coal-rich suit with a wolf smile, tapped a silver cane on the plank and waited to take what fear could buy. Elias Ward, 32, freighter and winter woodsman, broad-shouldered from hauling timber out of the hills, quiet by habit, stood just inside Keaton's mercantile doorway with a crate rope over one palm and an oiled hickory haft under the other. He had come for nails and salt and a new axe head. He hated crowds. He hated paper tricks more. And when he saw the nun's steady face and the way her shoulders refused to bow, something moved in him like a log shifting in a spring flood. The first two lines of the day were simple and bright and cold. Then the cut came. Elias stepped out into light and crossed the street without raising his voice. He put the new axe head on the sheriff's table, set a stack of dollars beside the ledger, and said in the even tone of a man placing a fence post, "Call it, Sheriff? The fee to void a crooked right? The county price to kill a Sale that has no right to breathe?" Men's stilled breath held, cane taps paused. Vane's smile faltered a shade. Keeler stared at the money, stared at the axe head, stared at Elias, then at Agnes. The law of the territory gave him an out. If a citizen paid the docketed fee and took responsibility for the dispute until court, few used it, none against Malcolm Vane. He wetted his lips, looked at the notice, looked at the crowd, and hammered his palm on the table. "Docket satisfied. Sale dead," he said. "This woman is not forbidding. Any man argue it argues the law on my badge." The street changed shape in one breath. Noise dropped. The cane tapped again, slow and colder now. Agnes felt the cord cut from her wrists with one pull of the sheriff's pocket-knife. She did not flinch, did not thank. Only met Elias's eyes for a heartbeat. There was tiredness in her gaze and something sharp beneath it, the kind of steel forged by rooms where the hungry outnumber the loaves. Vane stepped down from the dais with that smile returned. He drifted near as if to smell whether courage had a scent. "Sheriff's price or not," he murmured. "Debts remain, sister. Doors shut the same, only slower. You and that little house you keep for orphans by the creek will find how winter stretches bills." He tipped his cane and drifted back. His men, 3 in long coats, shadowed him like dusk following a wall. Elias did not answer him. He lifted the axe head, slipped it into the leather wrap, and turned slightly so he stood between Agnes and the men without making a show of it. Keeler snapped the ledger shut and told the street to clear. "Move along, nothing to see but a lawful fee, move along." They moved, but their ears stayed turned. Inside the mercantile's bright doorway, Agnes stood with her cloak pulled tight, hands red from the cold. She spoke first, her voice low and even. The way of someone used to bedside prayers said while children slept. "You paid a county fee to end a wicked thing," she said. "Not to claim a person?" "Yes." Elias nodded once, a plain motion. "I paid to kill it," he answered. "And I will sign the paper that says I will answer for any noise it makes when it tries to rise again. That is all. Work is needed up the gulch. I haul for the mission when I can, and the roof at St. Bridget's needs new boards before snow turns to knives. If you want to walk with my sled, we will walk. If you want to walk away, you will walk. Either way, the Sale is buried." Agnes looked at his hands, the rope scars across the knuckles, the clean wrap around the new iron, the way he left space at the door so she could choose a path. She nodded once, the same plain motion he had given. "The house by the creek does need boards," she said, "and flour and a kettle that does not leak into the fire." She paused. There was also a letter this morning from a churchman in Bismarck, a tidy letter full of sums. It spoke kindly while it balanced numbers against lives. It told me to yield our land to a company and move the children inland. And I stood in the dark and wondered if obedience is holier than bread. Her mouth tightened. She tied her cloak. "I will walk to the creek with you, Mr. Ward." Wind rose behind them as they pushed a short freight sled from the shed. The dun mare, Maple, shook her head and sent steam into the morning. Rope hitched, crates tied, axe wrapped and slotted. The town shrank with each crunch of runner on crust. Agnes walked beside the sled for the first stretch, her stride even, her breath white and steady. Elias walked on the other side, boot edges cutting arcs in snow. He did not ask questions. She did not offer stories. Malcolm Vane watched from the balcony of the hotel, that silver wolf smile gone thin. A foreman with a scar at the hinge of his jaw stood beside him. Huck Driller, a man who set charges underground and thought everything above ground should also answer to his plunger. Vane spoke low like a man naming chores. 2 hours, take 2 hands, collect our debt. Bring the paper back if you can and make noise if you must. Driller nodded, hunger in his eyes, and vanished with his men along the lower road. The creek forked after a mile into a flat of thin ice and black water. The crossing looked steady, but the center held a grey that spelled trouble. Elias tied a second line from the mare to a stump and tested with the iron-tipped pole he kept for winter work. Slow and straight, he said, to the sled and to Agnes. "Keep your weight, listen to the ice, do not argue with it." Danger came visible before the hour mark, just as the sky went pewter. One runner sank with a brittle crack and the sled slewed. The front corner dipped and a crate skidded toward open black. Agnes lunged without making a sound, her cloth-wrapped hands catching the rope around the crate. Her heels dug, the sled groaned, the axe-wrap slid. Elias shoved his shoulder under the raised rail and took the strain, knee-deep in water that cut like glass. The mare leaned like a beast that understood math. Runners squealed, the world held its breath. One hard heave, a long scrape, and the runner clanged up onto ice again. The sled thudded flat. Water sloshed. Agnes's hands shook in the cold but did not let go until the crate was lashed twice. Elias blew out one breath and laughed once. The kind of short, rough laugh a man gives when a door falls shut behind him without taking his coat. His teeth flashed white in the iron light. "Good," he said, "simple as that. Your grip is better than half the teamsters in this county." She looked at him. A corner of her mouth moved. The lightest answer to a compliment she did not expect. They made the far bank and the slope beyond. Snow fell in a dry hiss now. The wind turned sly. The hills cupped their sound. Agnes spoke as they climbed. Not about vows yet, not about cities and letters, but about wooden kettles and the leak she had counted in the roof. The way the girls slept in the far corner, so the winter drip would not thread down into their blankets. Elias listened, his boot prints steady. He did not know how to answer prayers with words, but he knew how far a new board could reach. The line shack in the pines was a square of warmth that smelled of coffee and sap. They took it because the sky darkened fast, and the mare stamped with a patience that had limits. Inside, Elias set the kettle, stripped his wet coat, and wrapped his forearm where the ice had kissed skin raw. Agnes stood near the stove with hands held out, fingers pinking as blood returned. She watched steam rise and she watched him not speak. Quiet men in winter had always made her wonder what words they burned before they reached the tongue. She said the thing that had been turning under her ribs since the courthouse. "I have served the rulebook of distant men longer than I have served the breath in a child's chest," she said. "And today, when you put coins on a county ledger and said, 'Kill that sale,' I felt something tear and something mend at the same time." She looked at the stove door at the bright bar inside. "I do not know if I still serve a house with a cross on the roof, or if I serve the hungry where I find them and ask forgiveness later." She stopped, her jaw tight. The confession hung in air like snow that has not decided to fall. Elias folded the towel on his arm and answered the only way he knew. "Service is a set of hands," he said. "I have 2 hands and a sled. You have 2 hands and a will. We will put boards on a roof tomorrow. The rest is tomorrow's quarrel." They did not get a tomorrow without purchase, because Huck Driller's men found their tracks before dawn and lit the lower brush to smoke them out. Orange rolled through blue like a bad idea, deciding it would rather be a decision. Elias smelled it first, stepped outside, and saw the wind pushing fire toward the slope like a rude friend. "There is a footbridge up the ravine," he said. "Old lumber camp line. It crosses to stone where flame eats slower. We take the high edge. We go now." They moved. Sled left, packs on shoulders, mare led by a short rope. Smoke tried to take their breath and failed. The ravine opened like a mouth with teeth made of granite and snow. A rope and board footbridge swung there, old but straight, its far anchor in clean rock. Its near anchor bolted to a pine that had seen 3 winters too many. Drillers' men showed on the ridge behind them. Dark coats. One waved an arm like a flag. The fire behind them cracked with a voice. They were too far for shots to be anything but warning foolishness. Elias did not raise his rifle. He did not draw a pistol. He put the mare's rope around a bare root and tested the first slat with his boot. Agnes looked once into the ravine and then not again. Her jaw set. The wind bullied the bridge. Boards rattled. The world leaned. He crossed first with the packs, came back, then set Agnes on the first boards with the rope around her waist and the other end around his. He did not touch her otherwise. "Step light and even," he said. "Look at the far bolt and pretend it is a candle on a chapel rail." She almost smiled and did what he said. Boards creaked but held. The far side drew closer with the slow certainty of honest work. At the last set of boards a dull crack sounded under their feet. The pine that held the near anchor groaned. Fire had bitten its roots on the sheltered side. The bridge dropped one hand's breadth and then another. Huck Driller whooped like a man who liked to run along cliff edges for sport. Elias's eyes stayed on the far bolt and the rope in his hands. The final 3 boards jumped loose and lunged. Agnes would have fallen if the rope had not gone hard around her middle. Elias took the shock in both hands, and the wood burned his palms through old glove leather. He hauled once, twice, got her to the rock, then bent and drove the axe head's wedge point into a crack to pin the last rope before it unthreaded. The old line rasped, screamed and held. The near anchor let go and the far half of the bridge tore free and swung like a door into empty air. Driller's men pulled up fast, faces pale where the smoke left room for color. No one fell, no one shot, no one cheered. Breath came hard and white and the fire did the talking. They took the stone path down while the ridge behind them argued with flame. By noon they reached the creek bend where St. Bridget's sat, a low adobe and plank square with a bell rope and a yard that had seen too many thin summers. Agnes stopped there and looked at the roof as if it were a map. She set her jaw the same way she had on the courthouse steps and went straight to the shed for a ladder. Elias went for the boards. They worked as if building could be a prayer. Nails rang, boards took their seats, smoke thinned to a memory line on the hills. By late day, a new section lay tight under the winter sun. The kettle on the hearth finally boiled without spilling into the coals. 2 small faces peered from a window, with the solemn curiosity of children told to stay back. Agnes shooed them with a hand and could not keep from smiling as they ducked. Sheriff Keeler rode in at dusk with 2 deputies and a narrow look. He had followed smoke and talk. He took statements without making enemies on purpose, then told Agnes and Elias what he had already told Vane at the hotel. The docket is satisfied, the fee was clean, the writ is dead until a judge who signs his name with his own hand says different. And any man who tries to take a woman on the strength of one company's paper will see the inside of my cell and the color of my temper. He tipped his hat, glanced up at the new boards and said, "That's good work." Vane did not come himself. That kind of man rarely does. But his carriage rolled out at dawn headed north for Bismarck, where letters walked in fine boots. He left a note with the hotel clerk for the sister in the Creek House. Polite, edged, a promise turned sideways. Agnes read it once, folded it small, and slid it under a candle stub where flame ate it slow and clean. Days turned in order now. Not easy, but honest. Snow softened, water ran louder, the mare's coat shed winter, work moved from roof to fences. Elias hauled and cut and mended. Agnes measured and baked and taught letters at a plank table with 3 wobbly chairs. She still went to the chapel room at dawn, still tied the veil when she prayed, but she left it off when she climbed ladders. Her hands remembered rosaries and learned hammers. Her question did not leave her. It only changed shape. "Who do I serve?" she asked inside herself as she hauled water and counted loaves, and the answer came back the way creek water comes back against a palm. Not as a voice, but as a push. Serve breath, serve hands. Serve the living where they stand, write letters when you must, and build boards when you can. and when distant rules argue with hungry faces, choose the faces and let the rest argue with God. Malcolm Vane sent a lawyer 2 weeks later with tidy boots and a colder smile than his master. The man asked for restitution and spoke of trespass and interference with contract. Elias stood on the porch with his hat off and the axe at his heel. The sheriff came up behind the lawyer like weather and handed him a stamped paper of his own, a notice that the county was investigating a fraud against a charitable house, and that until that was finished, no one would collect anything from anyone in Redwater Crossing without choking on it. The lawyer left with dust on his cuffs and a lesson in the town's appetite for his kind of math. The long middle danger had come in fire and rope and ice. The later ones came smaller, the way small stones chew at boot soles. The two of them met each without glamour, one by one, and sometimes Agnes laughed at herself because none of the saints had written about mule hooves or kettle leaks or children who hid each other's shoes, and yet she found more grace in those hours than in any sermon she had ever memorized. It took a month for the ground to show green edges and the creek to throw real light. On a warm noon with sky like a washed shirt and air that smelled of damp pine, Elias set the last brace on a small lean. To that would keep the firewood dry. Agnes stood at the gate with her sleeves rolled and her hair braided tight. She watched two children chase each other around the bellpost and then looked toward the road where the town lay. She touched the simple wooden cross at her throat and did not grip it like a lifeline, only like a friend. She walked to Elias and stood with him looking at the roof they had made together, at the fence they had mended, at the dun mare asleep on her feet in the shade. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. "I will still pray in the morning, and I will still sign my letters. Sister Agnes, because that is how I learned my name, but when I ask who I serve, I will answer, I serve whoever stands hungry inside my reach. I will not wait for a distant seal to make it safe." Elias met her eyes. There was a softness there that had nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with a choice made and remade. He nodded once, the same plain motion that had started this line of days. "If papers come again," he said, "we will pay what price kills them and build what roofs keep them out. And if work comes, we will take it. And if rest comes, we will not argue." Sun leaned kind across the yard. Cloth on the line moved a little. The creek flashed, and the country that often bit at soft places let its jaw loosen for an hour. The story looked simple when told from a distance. A quiet man put coins on a table and said no to a crooked use of law. A nun stepped down from a set of steps and chose service over obedience, and found that service held her steadier than any rule. Danger came honest in ice and rope and fire, and was met with hands and breath and patience rather than swagger. The sheriff's badge was used as a shield and not a cudgel. A company's reach stumbled over a town's spine. In bright afternoon light, two people stood by boards they had nailed and water they had hauled, and decided to keep standing that way. Together the wicked sail stayed dead, the sheriff's price turned into planks and flour and a school table, and the wondering nun learned that the answer to who she served was not a signature, but the warm weight of a loaf handed to a child who needed half of it now and the other half later. And the quiet woodsman learned that sometimes the only word a man needs to say is the first one he says right, and then he can spend the rest of his days proving it with his hands. Click on the video to watch story that moves you much more than that. Subscribe to the Wild Frontier Tales and tap the bell so you never miss our heartbeat tale.